In this tutorial, we're going to create this really fun 3D slime text effect in After Effects. No plugins or nothing needed. I think it's fun, but I'm biased. Let's see how this works. So let's create a new composition. We can hit this button up here. I'm going to name it __MAIN. That keeps things nice and alphabetical. I'm going with 1920 by 1080. I'm using 60 frames per second. You could go with 30. 60 is going to render a little bit longer, but I like the smooth look that we're going to get. So you could go with either one, and we just press OK. Now we need some text to start off. So go to the type tool, click around here, call this slime or whatever you want. I would use a thick font here. I'm using this antique olive, but you could use any bold font. You could try a thin font. I don't know if it's going to come out good, but maybe it's going to be amazing. So I'll leave that up to you. And I want to pre-compose this. That'll make changes easier later on. So I just right click, go to pre-compose. I'll call this EditText. And now let's make this a little bit smaller. So we've got that in there. And what we want to do is jump on into this here. So we call this EditText because we know if we want to change this text later on, we just go here to do it. I want to put one effect on here. I'm going to go to effects and presets. I got it typed in already, but ROUGH. And that'll get you towards this roughen edges effect. And you just drop this on here. Now, if we zoom in, you'll see we got a rough edge, just like the name implies, but we don't really want that. We want to go to the fractal influence, take that down to 0. And now instead of roughening the edges, we're rounding the corners. Little trick there. And if you need to make it more round or less round, you could adjust this number here. But for me, this seems to be working good, and you could tell the before and after. So with more natural looking text, you don't want these really sharp, impossibly straight lines and pointy corners. So having a little bit of a rough edge fixes some of that issue. So let's zoom out here. And I also want to dive out of this composition. So I'll just hit this X. And now that'll take me back to the main comp. So now what we want to do is get some depth to this text. So let's right click on this layer, go to layer styles, and let's find this inner glow here and expand our inner glow options. So a few things to do here. I'm going to set this to normal from screen. I'll bring this to 100%. I'll set my color to black. I will go from softer here under technique and make that precise. Now let's actually see what we're doing by taking the size, bring this up. So we get this type of look. That's kind of what I'm going for. We can take a look at the range and bring this up here so our edges aren't quite as dark. That looks pretty good to me. I've got 3D text. Now we could take a look at the actual slime part. We now want to create a new comp. So just hit this little button here, call this slime, and 1920. Just want to make it match your original main comp. That looks good. Okay, so in here, I want to make a new solid. Just right click an empty spot here, go to new, go to solid. I want to make this green or whatever color you want your slime to be. I'm just going to go with a green that's slightly dark like that. Press OK. And actually, let's name this slime base. That'll be our base of our slime, also matching our comp size. What you want to do is find MR. And once you get that, you'll find this Mr. Mercury after you type MR and drop that on here. It's not going to look like anything until we slide this over. I don't want this to have to start up initially. What I'm going to do is just drag this layer over here to the left. It's kind of at the beginning of the clip. It's already got something to do. And then the end of the clip, make sure you see this double arrow. You just drag that to the end. We basically have a pre-run here, and that is fantastic. So what I'm going to do now is change some of these settings. I'm going to go from explosive, and I'm going to set that to fire, and I'm also going to spread it out on the X radius. I'm gonna bring the Y radius down. I don't want it to start off, anywhere other than this line here. So let's just see what this looks like. That looks good. We can go into the gravity. We can make it go down. Let's go to our producer. and bring this so it starts a little bit higher. I can align with my text later on. For now, let's look at some more of these settings. And okay, so it's getting a little crazy here. What I'm gonna do is take the velocity down a bit. I'm gonna go to the extra. I'm gonna set that to 0. Okay, so now it looks like it's glooping and falling down just kind of how we would want it. So if we want this to go faster, we can go into the gravity, and I'm going more into negative to make it go down faster. And as you do that, if you want these to kind of coagulate a bit, you have this resistance value. If you bring this up, it kind of adds kind of like a drag friction force. So it might start off faster, and then as things go like through air friction or whatever it's trying to simulate, it'll slow down a bit. So you might kind of play between resistance and then adding more gravity, more into the negative, see what kind of settings that you get. If you want, you could go in and add a little bit of velocity now. So we set it to 0, but if we start to bring this up, you'll see it'll give you a little bit more random side to side movement. I don't want too much of that, but a little bit will probably be good for variety's sake. And you can just kind of bring this up until things start to go a little bit too crazy. That's starting to look interesting. If you want to go into the extra, it's an extra side to side movement. So you could drag it to the right or to the left, and you'll see, does that give you a good thing? But it's good, I think, to start off with extra and velocity at 0, get things going how you want, and then reintroduce them one at a time. Longevity, how long are they going to stay on screen for? We've got birth rate. If we want more, just bring this up. Now these are really kind of one big mass. So as you do that, you might want to come back here and start to bring the gravity back down. It takes a little practice and getting used to, but you'll get it how you want after a while by going through these values, and you can make yours look completely unique, or you could try using these settings. The last thing is, as these get to the end of their life, they're staying really large. So if you go to blob depth size and bring that down, go to blob birth size. So now at the end, they're smaller. Birth size at the beginning, they're getting larger. So you could do something like that. And now we basically have this blob waterfall. I think it works for now. And we just need to adjust the look, the lighting of this a little bit. Okay, now let's take a look at these two sections down here, light and shading. This is going to be more interesting if we go from, at least in my opinion, from distant light to point light. Once we do that, we're going to have this thing where we can move our light around. You can even animate this later on if you want some variety. Everything is really bright. I'm going to go and I'm going to start to bring the ambient down, maybe even bring the diffuse down fairly low. The specular, I'm going to keep that all the way up. Roughness, this will determine how shiny things are. And one thing that we can also do is go into the light color. Let's say we want a little bit more variety and have a kind of a bluish highlight. We try and do this, but you'll see we're not really getting that effect. So let's see what's going on here. And taking a look at this metal, if I bring the metal down, the metal kind of makes your highlight the same color as the base. And you could go with that, or you could start to bring this down either all the way or most of the way. And now your actual color has more influence. So if we go with this really dark blue, it's just not really lighting things enough. So in that case, we could go to light intensity and bring that up. And not saying that that looks great, but you got a little bit more variety. Let's say we want kind of green slime with a slight yellowish highlight. Maybe now the intensity is too high for that color. And don't forget, you can also come back to the metal and bring that up if you want adjustments. And we also have the metal opacity. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. And you can see how now we've got a little bit more, just a little bit more extra control over this. I think that can work. We can always color correct later on too for even more control. Yeah, so now we've got a bit more interesting color. And the last thing is, everything is good, but it's just a little too CG, a little too generic looking. So a little bit of distortion on here will help to make things a bit more natural. Turbulent displace, and then you could find it under distort, turbulent displace. So this will add just a little extra variety here to hopefully make things more interesting. This is a little too much displacement. We can go in here and adjust the amount, maybe something like that. Also the size, we could adjust that. If it's really big, it's not going to be noticeable. If it's really small, it's just going to be kind of a ripply effect. So find the right one there. You got this offset here on the X and the Y. So as we bring this down, you might think that's the way you want to go, but you might want to actually have this go upwards, and that'll be a counteracting of the downwards motion. Let's see if that works. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Option, click on this little button here on the stopwatch, and this is 2 values, so we want an X and a Y. I'm going to do open bracket, close bracket. For the X, we want that to be 0. We don't want that to do anything. And then comma, and for the Y, time asterisk, let's say 100, and let's just see how that works. Not a huge difference. You can tell something is going on. Let's go for a little bit more in the amount. Okay, I think that's good. I might just want to now counteract that with lowering the size a bit. I think that's good. It's adding kind of this little wiggling motion at the end that we weren't getting before. Now you could see how that looks. And it's always good to do a before and after just to kind of compare how things were going. This is what we had before, just kind of generic. And this is what we have now, which is slightly less generic. You could go in and you could add another turbulent displace at a larger size, at just really subtle values, and change different things here. You can also adjust the evolution. Actually, you know what, that looks pretty good. Let's just do that right now. Option, click on that, and we'll do time times 100. Worked last time. Maybe that's too much, but I think that's okay. It's got the variation that I need, but I definitely would think about adding a second version of this with maybe a really large size, you know, really subtle, and kind of layer things for more variety. All right, so let's collapse this up. What I want to do in here is constrain this to show up just where the text would be. So I'm going to go to my edit text, drop it down on here. I'm going to use that as a matte here. So we can do alpha matte, and now you'll see only slime inside the letters, but we want it to be expanded out just a little bit over the original. So type in choke, and we have this matte choker, and we'll drop this on here, and we want to bring this in. So in the negative direction, you could see that's expanding it out a bit. Let's drop another one on here because I think we've reached the limit. So I'm going to drop another one onto this layer, and again go into the negative direction. Okay, so you can see they have a limit, but you can put on one, and then you can put on a second one and get the expansion that you need. Let's close the slime tab here and see how we can combine the slime and text together. So we got the text in here already. We just take our slime comp, drop it right on top. So, okay, this doesn't look great yet. We are making progress little by little. So the thing we can do here is we could leave this gray text, or we could try and spice this up with some color. But the way this is made, if I take this curves and I drop this onto, sorry, you could just type curves here and find under color correction curves. So if I start to adjust this, you can, well, let's hide this just so we know that we're on the right layer here. And yeah, so something weird is going on, right? And let's delete this layer here. It's because we are creating this entire look from the layer styles, and they don't really interact with effects that well all the time. Simple fix, we just take this layer, pre-compose it onto itself. Let's do that now, and I'll just right click on that layer, pre-compose, and click this option here. I'm going to call this edit text, and then color be our color adjustment comp. That's it. We should be able to now drop a curves on here. And yeah, so let's turn this back on so we can compare these, and we could adjust the slime color too a bit, but we could add some more contrast. We can go into the color. We can add some color if we want to make this blue. Yeah, let's add a little bit of blue in here. I think that'll work. The reds. We could do a purplish type of an effect. Also, I'm going to hide the top layer just so we could see more clearly. If we go into the RGB, we could get some interesting effects. I'm just putting a point here and then another point here, and we could get kind of this rim lighting effect where we got that bit of green and it gets darker and then brighter. And now let's adjust the colors a little bit more. Could really go overboard. Want to be careful. Okay, I kind of like this where it's got that pink and greenish color along the outside. And okay, I think this works. Now let's take a look at our slime. You know what? I think the slime is okay for now. I'm going to make some adjustments to it, and I might come back to colors later. Okay, so just full disclosure here, one of the videos in this series got lost, so I'm going to try and backtrack and fix some stuff here. What I'm going to do now, and what you could do, is double click on this slime comp, and in here, if you'll notice when you click this transparency grid, I dropped the transparency down. What I want to do is select the slime base layer, and I'm going to expand the Mr. Mercury effect. So this this material opacity, I think I called it metal option or opacity before, but I brought this down. I didn't realize that this needed to be at 100%. So I'm going back to 100%. We can see, okay, everything looks good. Now I'm going back. Well, let's just close this tab here. And then we're back into the main comp. Now this looks completely different, but this is what we want. The next step is to select this layer here, press Command D to duplicate it. And I'm going to bring this up here. So now we've got a copy on top. Now you don't want to delete this curves here. I'm going to delete it because I just want to copy and paste the changes that I made. So you could keep yours, and then I'm going to press Command V. You don't have to do that. So I just pasted a copy of the curves because I fiddled around and made a bunch of adjustments here. Yeah, so this looks weird, but I need to switch this back to overlay, or switch it to overlay. So this is the look that we're getting. So with this overlay, we're kind of like seeing parts of the text through the letters, and I think this looks better. Might be a little bit overexposed, but you could always come in here and lower some of these settings here on the actual RGB part. That's basically it. I think that catches up to speed. So just a word of caution that the look might be slightly different in the next step, but this should get you where you need to go. I want to add a little bit more detail. So I've typed the effect in already, but PLAS, and then you'll see CC plastic. You can drop this onto our slime layer. On this plastic, you can see right away, we're getting some nice extra little detail in here. And if you want, you can go into the lighting and shading, make adjustments that work for you. The settings are very similar to this lighting and shading of the this original blob effect we created. And speaking of that original effect, I think some of these highlights are getting a little too overexposed. What I'm going to do is zoom out so I could see an empty area of the canvas here, or the artboard, whatever you call it, the background, and go to new, right click, new viewer. So now I've got two views. This one is locked, you can see here, and we want to keep it locked. This one is unlocked. When I jump into a new comp, first of all, just double clicking on this, you'll see this one shows this comp. This one stays locked to where we had it, which is great because we can come in here, find our original slime base, and you can see, yeah, they got lighting and shading very similar to the plastic effect. So I think my light intensity, let's start bringing that down. Okay, so we could still see some pretty bright highlights, but they're not too overpowering. I might bring it down a little bit more and just take a look. Nice highlights, nice. Got some nice color variation there, and I think I'm going to go with that. So let's close this. We actually can close out our slime comp there. Now we've got this effect, and we've got the colors looking a little bit nicer. The great thing is we're starting to see like extra little detail around the shapes. That kind of stuff will make things look more realistic. You really got to play this to know for sure if it's going to look good or not. And I'll just render out like I don't know, half a second is probably enough. So okay, we are getting the details. Now let's take a look at an issue here. We've got perfectly smooth and even amounts of slime coming off of the edge of the letter, and I want to get some distortion there. So if you type ROUG and then you'll find this roughen edges, I'm going to drop that onto my slime layer, and you can see already it's doing a pretty good job here. I might want to go with the scale, raise that up to kind of get the bumpiness to match the shape of the slime inside. So you can see before everything is neat and even, after we got a little bit of distortion. I think maybe the slime needs to come off the letters a little bit further. Let's double click slime comp to jump in there. And then if we select the track matte for that, we've got these two matte chokers. I'm going to select one and press Command D to duplicate it. And we've just pushed the slime out a little bit further. Might want to duplicate it one more time, but let's just see. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. Just increase the thickness. We can fractal influence. I think, yeah, that's set to its highest. Now border, this is kind of an interesting thing. You're going to have to adjust this to fit your needs. Let's find like a good spot here. Actually, let's just set the border to 0 so we can see exactly what's going on. So with border 0, you're going to see these kind of sharp edges and corners. And as you bring this up, this is going to start to round things off. And it'll also, see if I could find a good example. When the slime gets close to each other, as you raise this border up, it's going to start to, oh, that's pretty high. Eventually, it's going to start to meld. Okay, so you can see here where it starts to meld together. But as it does that, that's kind of a cool effect. But as you raise the border up, you see how it's getting really soft. I'll just turn this off completely. The edges are here are crisp. I mean, I'm zoomed into 400%, so you're seeing pixels, but it is starting to blur the edge. So if you like that level of border, then you're gonna have to take the edge sharpness and try to bring that up to counteract. And we should be taking a look at the big picture to see if we got something that we like and doing some previews. Okay, so that's pretty good. Maybe the scale is still a little bit too low. Bring this up. Let's try to do this more carefully. 160, let's try 180. Again, these numbers are all gonna change depending on the scale of your letters. Okay, so now this looks good, except all of our globs around the edges are just stuck in one place. And that doesn't match the movement of the inside stuff. So we got to fix that. Really easy to do. On this offset turbulence, we just option click it. I like to do open bracket, close bracket, then press left arrow to go in between them and type 0 for the first X value, comma, and then the Y value will make that time times. I usually start with 100, but I know that's going to be too slow because I've done this before. I know 1,000 is going to be a little bit better speed. And now you see those gloops and globs are kind of following the speed of the overall slime. And let's just take a look and see how that works. So yeah, you see it looks like it's dripping down the sides. I think that is working. To make things look a little bit more realistic, we can try to add some of the pink color into reflections on the slime. And we could do that similar to the way we did plastic here. Just type in glass, GLAS, that's probably enough. And the CC glass, we could drop it. Well, let's just put it right below here. And what I want to do is expand the shading, lighting, and surface. I'm going to use this eyedropper, click on it, and then I want to click right in the middle here. Just get my main color, not the highlight, not the shadow, but this pink color. I'm going to bring my light intensity way up just so I could really see exactly what it's doing. Now I know the metal quality is going to have a lot of influence, so I'm going to take that all the way down to 0. Roughness, yeah, let's keep that pretty low. Now I'm also going to, do I want more or less diffuse? I guess less diffuse. And now it's getting pretty dark, so I'm going to take ambient and bring that up. And I just want it to be close to how it was before as far as the color goes. So I think the ambient up and the diffuse down is helping there. I'll stick with distant light. I could switch this to point light and I'll have a little bit more control, but I'm going to adjust rotation here and you can see, okay, now it feels like it's more towards the bottom of the masses. And I kind of like that. Yeah, so we've got light height. This is going to make it more of a rim light or completely straight above. I want this fairly low. And then we have height, which we can adjust. And you could see all the craziness that does. That's kind of distorting. I don't want too much distortion, maybe a little bit, but not too much. Actually, I'm going to negative there. Yeah, so we could actually bring the displacement down and softness. If we want to smooth this thing out a bit, we can do that. And okay, so not a huge deal, but it does add a little extra detail. We're bringing some of this pink color here or whatever your text color is, just a way to add a little bit more detail. Looks like light is reflecting or refracting or whatever light does inside of slime that is dripping on 3D letters. Let's just assume that's what it's supposed to do, and we'll do a quick play and we'll see what we got there. That is probably enough with this slime for now. Let's see if we could add a little bit of depth with the drop shadow. So just type in DROP space, not drip shadow. DROP space S. So we got drop shadow and we'll drop it onto our slime layer and I'll just zoom in a bit. I'm not going to do too much with this. What I do want is this to be straight down. So if you hold on shift and drag this dial here, you can constrain it. I want to add some color. So I'm going to go with the eyedropper and click not quite in the completely dark black area here, but somewhere in this maroonish dark. I think that's good. Probably just leave that as it is. So it's fairly subtle. You'll notice it does make it look like it's sitting on top of the letter now instead of just, you know, like a completely flat shape. So that's the drop shadow. We've been adding effects to our slime, but we've been missing the text. So let's combine them together and add one final plastic effect. Click the top layer, shift click the bottom layer. We got them all selected. And then you could right click, go to pre-compose and call this slime and TXT. Press OK. Now just type in PLAS. You'll get CC plastic. You could drop that on here. And I'm just going to expand all 3 sections. I'm going to use my eyedropper and grab kind of this most saturated pink color here. And I'm going to turn metal down. And that's going to make some of that pink lighting and highlighting show through. It's a little bit sharp. So let's take the roughness and rough it up a bit. I think that's good. Let's look at some of our other settings because I think we're making it a bit darker looking. Let's take diffuse, bring that up. Yeah, bring that up a bit. bit. Maybe also ambient, bring that up a bit. That might be a little too bright now. No, that's pretty good. I like that. Get some of the other settings. Dust, we could bring that up. That kind of adds a little bit of a nice rim lighting effect. I kind of like that. You got to be careful with that sometimes, but I think it's good as it is. I'm going with distant light. You could switch that to point, but I'm just going to leave that. It seems like it's fine for now. You could rotate that if you want stuff to go in a bit of a different direction. That should just about do it. You could adjust the light height. I think it was pretty good as it was. Let's do a preview. I think that worked pretty well. So now I just want to make sure my slime is coming down in the best position possible. So I'm going to zoom out. That way I could right click in this empty area, go to new viewer. I'll zoom this one out, making sure this one is locked, this one is unlocked. And I want to find where that slime effect is. So let me double click in here, slime. Okay, so that's our slime layer. Let's double click on it. And here is the actual Mr. Mercury effect. So what I want to do is adjust the producer on the Y. You can put this in the spot where you want it. Maybe you want it to kind of come down like something like that. And then just do a click over here and do a preview to see if you like that. I kind of like it when it's just forming at the top. It's not starting somewhere up here already. So I think this will give a more interesting dynamic look on top, except I want it to be fading out faster. So it's kind of fading out maybe somewhere down here. I do like this look, and I could also preview it over here too. I do like this look where it's kind of undulating on top. I think that's going to be good. Now we just have to kill it off sooner. So let's go to longevity and start to dial this back, and it'll fade out a little bit sooner. I think this is interesting. We could preview it over here. With all the effects, when I preview it over here, it's going to go a little bit slower. That's why it's not a bad idea to preview it in here to see if it's good, and then do another look over here. Let's close this one down. And one last thing, just to spice it up a bit, I'm going to take this layer, duplicate it. This background one, I'm going to blur it. So FAST, fast box blur. Let's drop this on here. Take this blur radius, bring this up a bit. This will give us kind of a glow effect without putting anything on top of the work we did. So we got before and after. We should take a look. All right, so that's basically our slime effect. We got some oozing. We got some kind of bubbling on top. I like how that's working. One thing, I feel like it could kind of shrink down a little bit more as it comes down. So let's find our slime. Where is it? Okay, here we go. So inside this slime comp under Mr. Mercury, depth size. Let's shrink this down. Okay, as it comes down, it's gonna come out into smaller pieces. See if that looks any better. This looks a little bit better to me. It's not completely covering the letters all the time, so we're seeing some of that pink background, getting a nice contrast between colors. A more interesting look, I think. Remember, there is an infinite amount of possibilities with an effect like this, so go ahead and mess around, add stuff, make changes, get it to look even better than what you see here. And also don't forget, this is fully procedural. So if we find our edit text comp here, we just double click on it, type something else. If your favorite soda is Slurm, you could put this here instead. And when we go back to our main comp, we will see it updates and stays live. So this is our slime effect. And I was getting a little bit of a flickering effect with the highlights, and I was able to fix that just by taking the roughen edges and making sure it's below the CC plastic and the CC glass. I think it was in between these two. And I was getting a bit of a flickering effect, and really simple fix, just changing the order of the effects in the slime and text comp on the slime layer, and just shifting the order here. That does it.